Hi everybody, welcome back to Family Recipes with Amanda. It's been a while, I know, but during quarantine there's nobody to share all these baked goods with, and we had to clear a little bit of backlog from the videos. So I know it's not Christmas, it's April. Christmas is 8 months away, but due to popular demand, I am today making for you my Buche de Noel. Buche de Noel is a Yule log, traditional French Yule log cake that would be served at Christmas time. So even though it's not Christmas, I'm going to make it anyways, because it's basically just a roulade cake. It's a roll cake, which can be adapted and changed in flavors for any occasion. For example, you could change it, instead of a chocolate base, you could make the sponge a pumpkin sponge and fill it with cream cheese frosting. You have a pumpkin roll now for Thanksgiving. For something lighter, summerier, you could do like a lemon sponge, and you could put blueberries and whipped cream inside of it. Or you could just do a straight up jelly roll with vanilla sponge and some lovely jelly, and you roll it up, and now you've got a jelly roll. So the possibilities are endless with a roulade cake. So really what we're focusing on today is the technique, not necessarily the flavor combination. So I hope you're excited. I'm going to start sort of out of order. I'm going to start with the whipped cream filling, just because I'd like to get that done and out of the way, and then it can just sit in the fridge until I'm ready for it when the cake is cooked and cooled. So that's where we're starting today, is with how to make whipped cream, which is a great skill to know anyways. It's super easy to make your own whipped cream, and I personally like it better than anything you can buy in the store, whether it's Dream Whip, Cool Whip, Ready Whip in a can, whatever. I like my homemade way better. So here we go. Okay, so to make your own whipped cream, it's really quite simple. There's really not a whole lot to it. Couple of tricks. I always like to start with a chilled bowl. Just stick your metal bowl in the freezer, in the refrigerator for 10 to 15 minutes just to get it cooled down. I find that helps the cream whip faster. I don't necessarily measure a ton of the whipped cream. It's just however much you have. So I have a little bit of cream left over that I want to use up before it goes off. So today I'm going to measure it for you, just because, you know, it helps when you're making it for the first time to have it measured. So yeah, that's about what I estimated. So I have about 2 cups, just a little shy of 2 cups of heavy whipping cream here, which I'm going to pour into my mixing bowl. And I've got the whisk attachment on it. Now you can whisk this by hand. You can mix it with a hand mixer, with a regular beater on a hand mixer. But, you know, obviously the fancier toys kind of help it go a lot faster. And so I'm going to start this whipping. You want a pretty good speed on your mixer, because we're trying to get it a lot of air whipped into there. So I like to let it get good and frothy for a while, and then I start slowly adding in a couple of tablespoons of sugar. Again, I don't really measure this. The sugar, I find, kind of helps to agitate the cream a little bit and make it whip up a little faster. And I never add probably more than 2 tablespoons. I don't like my whipped cream overly sweet. And I can start to see the whisk making trail marks in the cream. So that's how I know it's getting thicker. So I'm going to add just a little bit more sugar. Help that process along. And then I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. For flavor. It just helps punch up the flavor of your whipped cream a little bit. Now it's really starting to get nice and thick in there, soft heat. And I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of cream of tartar. Cream of tartar is a stabilizer that'll help my whipped cream stay firmer when I go to put it inside my roulade later on. I'm just going to let that incorporate. All right, I want to show you what this looks like because you do not want to over whip your whipped cream. If you over whip it, it will start to separate and sort of turn into butter. So this is what it should look like. You can see the end of the whisk. It's a stiff peak, which means it stands up by itself there. So that's what you want your whipped cream to look like. So I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator and I'm going to let it sit there until I'm ready for it. So we're ready to start making the cake. And the place to start with the cake is I need 6 egg yolks. So I have 2 bowls in front of me here and I am going to split the egg yolks. The whites into one bowl and the yolks into the next bowl. So I have a little fancy egg separator here, which I like to use. It's totally not necessary, but I find I like using it. I think it works better for me. I'll show you how to use both. I'll show you how to use the egg separator and I'll show you how to do it with just the shell. All right, so first with the separator. I like it because it hooks onto the edge of my bowl there. Okay, and it just sits in there and then I just give it a little swirl. And what you want to really be careful of, no matter how you're separating your eggs, is you don't want to get any egg yolk into your whites. The reason for that is if I'm cooking egg whites, if I'm whipping them into a meringue of any kind, and I get even one speck, one tiny dot of yolk in there because it breaks, those egg whites will not whip up into a meringue. They just won't go. So you really need to be careful when you're separating your eggs. Okay, so that was with my fancy egg separator, which I love. And now I'm going to use just a regular egg. So I just crack it on the side of the bowl, and you just kind of do a back and forth motion into the shell until you're kind of letting the whites drip out the bottom. This is why I like the egg separator, because with the sharp edges of the shell, it has a greater liability of getting some yolk into your whites. I've seen people separate egg yolks with their hands. It's just not something that I'm real comfortable with or familiar with. So I'll use the shell method, which is pretty good, or I'll use my egg separator, which is great. Plus, I feel like I get more egg white out of there when I do it that way. That's just me. And you might have noticed, by the way, that I'm using like some white and some brown eggs. That's just because that's what they had available at the store, and I tend to like brown eggs better. I don't know, I feel like they're more natural. And if I can get farm-raised eggs, oh man, I love those. Those are way better than store-bought eggs. But a friend of mine that I used to get them from, that I taught with, she retired, and now I've lost my egg supplier. So anyway, almost done here. 6 eggs is what I need. 6 eggs. Almost done. You can, this is where you can use your hand to just sort of help it along. I'll do the last one by hand just for funsies. Okay, so I'm separating. I'm just slowly, gently pouring the yolk back and forth. And what you're trying to do is use the edge of the eggshell to sort of cut between the egg and the white. So there we go. I'll just give my hands a quick rinse. I'm going to set my whites aside because I don't actually need them. I have my 6 egg yolks in a bowl, and then I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sugar to that, and I'm going to whip them until they are pale. Get my 1/2 cup measure here of sugar. 1/2 cup of sugar. Blend that in. Come on, there we go. And I also need a teaspoon of lemon juice for my recipe, and vanilla. Sorry about that. Just looking at my recipe off the side. So I need a teaspoon of lemon juice and a teaspoon of vanilla in this. All right, so I'll start with my vanilla. I got my teaspoon here. There we go. And again, we've talked before about how I like to use vanilla extract, pure vanilla extract. This happens to be organic, rather than the imitation vanilla. Now, I don't have lemon juice, so I'm just going to use my yogurt whey, which basically it's only a teaspoon of vanilla, so I don't think it's going to make much difference. It's just an acid. So off we go. I'm going to take this over to the mixer. All right, so once again, I've got my bowl attached with my whisk mixer. Again, you can do this with a hand mixer, regular. I just find, again, we're just getting that whisk on there, makes it a little airier. So I'm whisking these egg yolks and sugar and vanilla and lemon juice until they become a pale yellow. So I'm just going to turn that on, I'm going to let it go, and when it's all done, I'll show you what it looks like. There's really not anything for you to see. Okay, so here we've got our egg yolks and sugar, and they are whipped into this beautiful pale yellow color. You can see there's bubbles in there. And so we're just gonna set that aside, and we're gonna now whip up those egg whites that we separated. So I have my egg whites here, and I'm gonna pour them into my bowl. Now I will say that whereas a cold bowl is better for whipping cream, warm or room temperature eggs are better for whipping meringues. Eggs tend to whip better when they're warm. So we added a half a cup of sugar to the egg yolks, and now we're going to add the other quarter cup of sugar to the egg whites. But first we're going to get them whipping, and we got to get them nice and frothy first. Okay, so now I can see my eggs are kind of foamy. And so I'm going to start slowly adding the sugar. Again, that sugar helps to agitate the eggs, and the whisk helps to create the air. What we're trying to make here is a sponge cake, which is very light and fluffy. And so the sugar and the eggs are going to mix, and we're trying to get them to stiff heat. Now it's really foamy. I'm just going to throw in a pinch of salt, just a pinch, again, to help agitate the eggs and punch the flavor. By now your eggs are kind of doubled in volume, and I want it to be pretty stiff, but not all the way stiff, because I'm going to fold these two together and then add my dry ingredients, so I want these eggs to be able to hold up. All right, so I'm going to just check it so you can see. So you see how that's holding a peak? That's what we call a soft peak, because it bends. I can turn it upside down, it doesn't fall off, but it's not really stiff. So that's about where I want it to be, in that soft peak. So I'm going to pull that aside, and then I'm going to get my dry ingredients ready. So I've got my whipped egg yolks with sugar, I've got my whipped egg whites with sugar, and I've got 3/4 of a cup of flour and a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder sifted together. And now my job is to put all three of these together into one batter. And this is where it gets a little tricky. We need to fold the eggs gently together. We don't want to deflate all that good work we did with whisking them and lose all the air. The sponge that we're making, it's all about air. We don't want to lose that. So gently folding these together is kind of the key. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. All right, here we go. So I've got my egg yolks and sugar here. I've got my egg whites here. So I'm going to take a spatula, and I'm just going to take some of the egg whites, and I'm going to drop them into the egg yolks, and I'm going to fold them gently in. This sort of lightens up the egg yolk mixture, so it makes the whole thing better able to incorporate. So I'm just doing that slowly because I don't want to mash those egg whites down. Okay, so I've got that mixed in a little, pulling it up off the bottom. Okay, and then I can incorporate the rest, or maybe half of my egg whites in. Sort of, we want to do this in stages, right? We do not want to lose all of our good air volume. So the technique for folding is just lift from the bottom and fold over the top, and lift from the bottom, and then you can see I kind of turn my bowl a quarter turn as I go. Okay, and I'm just trying to be so gentle. Do not be rough with this dough. Okay, well, it's not dough, it's batter, but you get the idea. Okay, so now I'm going to sprinkle in some of the flour and cocoa powder mixture, and again, I'm just going to incorporate that, folding gently, ever so gently, sort of scraping the sides as I go. Scrape and fold, scrape and fold. Oh, we're almost there. Okay, I'll just scrape down the sides and we are ready to go. So it's this big poofy, you know, it's a poofy batter that we've got here, and that's what you want. We don't want it to be flattened. And so now I've got a prepared jelly roll pan, which basically is just a big 15 by 9-inch cookie sheet that I've covered with parchment paper. No greasing the pan for a sponge like this. If you grease the pan for your sponge, basically that's going to deflate your eggs, which again, we really don't want. So again, as gently as possible with as little work as possible, I'm just pouring the batter onto my sheet tray, scraping it all out. You can see there's no traces of flour in there. Okay, this is a gentle light color, and I'm just gonna gently spread it to a thin layer all across my pan. Just gentle, gentle, gentle. It doesn't get all the way to the corners, that's okay. It will spread a little as we go. So you're just making a nice rectangle out of it. And I think I'm going to call that good. All right, so now I'm going to put this in my 350-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes. Okay, so now I'm starting to make some of the other elements of the cake. Right now I'm making the frosting. So what I've done is I've heated a half a cup of cream on the stove, and I've got about 6 ounces of bittersweet chocolate chips in a bowl here, and I'm just going to pour the hot liquid over the chocolate chips, and I'm going to stir it together until that chocolate is all melted and incorporated. And then we're going to stick that in the refrigerator and let it chill down a little bit, and then we're going to whip butter into it, warm room temperature butter into it, to create a chocolate frosting, a chocolate buttercream frosting. Just chop my butter into, manageable chunks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed those chunks into my cream and chocolate mixture one at a time until they're all smooth. Alrighty. So it's a whipped ganache is basically what we're doing here. So I got my butter, and I add that in. I'm just whipping until I get all that butter incorporated. The bowl to mimic like what your stand mixer would do. Mix with one hand, spin with the other. I'm looking to make sure that I don't see any chunks of butter. Nobody wants to bite into a chunk of butter in their frosting. All right. So I'm just going to scrape down the sides of that, make sure everything is in there. I see a few streaks of butter, but that's basically ready to be spread. So that was room temperature butter. And I took my cream and chocolate mixture and I heated it up, melted the chocolate chips down, and just let it sit. So both were room temperature and they just whipped together so nice and easy. That's ready. That's going to be my frosting for the overall cake. Now, okay, that sound means the cake is done, and I'll show you the second scariest part of this whole thing. All right, so first let me show you, here's our beautiful cake. It's nice and fluffy still, and it's spread out a little bit. So now here's what we have to do. We have to take this pan and flip it upside down onto my dampened towel here. And that's the second scariest part of this whole project. So here we go. So I just kind of do it fast. I kind of got it on the edge. You can hear it's super hot. So just gotta have a little confidence. It's a little scary. And then we just want to, how do you get the hot pan off the counter is the question, right? Just need a little leverage. There we go. Oh, that's what I didn't want to do. Okay, so, see? We made it. So we flipped it over onto a damp towel, and now I'm peeling back the parchment paper. And we're gonna let our cake cool. We can't do anything with it until it's cool. And the reason for the damp towel is this is gonna keep our cake moist while it cools so that we can then unroll the cake, and it'll still have that rounded shape to it, but it won't crack, fingers crossed, while we unroll it and re-roll it at the end. That's why you want a damp towel. So I try to pick a lightweight damp towel here and fold it up to the edge. And so now you can see I'm just gonna gently roll, 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 roll. Yay. And I'm just gonna set it on my cooling rack here until it's cool to the touch on the outside, and then I'll unroll it and I'll fill it. The next part of our project will be creating, well, we've got our whipped cream filling, and I've got a caramel sauce filling that I'm gonna add to it. And I've already toasted and chopped some pecans that we're gonna put into it. So it's kind of like a turtle Buche de Noel. Normally, Buche de Noel, I might do like a hazelnut spread in the middle, or I might do some raspberry compote or raspberry jelly in there along with the hazelnut, because, you know, those are more, I don't know, wintry flavors. But because it's not Christmas, I'm actually going to just do a turtle flavor, and I'm going to do the decorations in a not Christmas format. Okay, I'm making decorations for my spring Yule log here. So I'll kind of show you what I've done. I dyed my fondant yellow and green, and I've already done it. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't, so I'm sorry you missed that. So basically I just take the food coloring, I put it, a little dot of it, just a little dab will do ya, in the fondant, and then work it through with my hands until it's a solid color. And then I roll it out nice and flat on my countertop, which is sort of sprinkled with cornstarch so it doesn't stick on there. And I roll it nice and thin, and I'll show you what I did to make the flowers. So I have a little tiny flower cookie cutter. So I cut out some cookie flower shapes. I'll just do 3 for now. And I have a little round end dowel. It's actually a stir stick, swizzle stick. I just stick it in the middle and fold my flower up and kind of twist it around itself. So it's this nice pretty daffodil rose. I don't know what shape that is, but I like it. Daffodils are my favorite spring flower. So that's why I did that. So one more time, stick your dowel in the middle. No 2 flowers are gonna come out the same, and that's just the way it is in nature anyway. So that's how we want it. And then I'm just setting them aside as I go. All right. So that's how you make a spring flower with fondant. All right, next I'm going to try to figure out how to make a leaf here. I'm cheating. You know what? You got to use what you got. I have, for some weird reason, I have a jalapeno cookie cutter here. Why not? You know, I probably do have a leaf cookie cutter somewhere in this house, but I'm not going to go find it. So I'm going to cut out some of those. And probably not as many as the flower shape. Probably won't put them on all of them. So I'm just going to cut a number because I also am trying to experiment here. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to make leaves out of these things. But I think this shape is going to work. I really do. So, one more maybe. Perfect. And then just set my fondant to side. If I need more, I can always bunch it up and re-roll it out. So I have some tools here, which I have a knife and a prong. So I'm going to start with that, and I'm going to maybe cut off these extra bits of the jalapeno. We'll experiment as we go. Edit later. Into a kind of a teardrop shape, maybe. Oh, that's all right. That's not bad at all. All right, so I've got kind of what I think looks like a leaf shape. And then I have a wheel here. And so I'm going to try to put the lines of my leaf in there. So I got, well, that's kind of fun. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying stuff. And then I can also use my knife here to kind of put some indentations in, like so. That's kind of cool. I like it. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep playing with my leaves here until I get a style that works for me. And I will see you when it's time to put it all together. I have been making my decorations over here. I got my leaves and I've got my flowers. And if you remember, we rolled them out in cornstarch, and so it's kind of hard to see, but they're covered in cornstarch right now. So that's not going to look good on my cake. So I just have a pastry brush, and I'm just going to gently go through and try to brush off as much of the cornstarch as I can. So some of you might be wondering why I have big white coconut flakes here on my spring decor board. And the reason for that is in northern Michigan, where I live, spring is slow to arrive. And so if you go out in the woods and you find a log, you're very likely to find snow all around that log well into May. So I'm going to have a little springtime snow on my leaves and flowers here. All right, so those are ready to go. I'm going to set those aside, and now we're getting to the scary part, the unrolling of the cake. Cake back together. So just to recap, this is what we have. So I have my buttercream frosting, which I made by adding chocolate chips and cream, melting them together, and then I just incorporated 6 ounces of butter and I whipped them together to make a lovely frosting. I've got my whipped cream that I made earlier today. Got my whipped cream that's going to go in there. I've got a jar of caramel sauce, just straight up caramel sauce that I had left over in the fridge, and I've got about a cup of toasted pecans, which I chopped up. So everything is here and ready for me to assemble. There's this idea in French cooking, which we call mise en place. You should have everything in place. I try my best, but I sure don't make it all the time. And then I've got all my beautiful decorations here that I've been making. Oh God. I've got all my beautiful decorations here that I've been making. I've got my little yellow spring flowers. I've got my coconut snow here, which I'm going to sprinkle on my log, and I've got my spring leaves. So now all that's left is to unroll the cake and put it all together. Okay, this is the scary part. This is the part where I usually start swearing because the cake cracks or what have you. So please bear with me. I will hope and pray that the cake gods are with me today. All right, so see, you can see some of the cake stuck to the towel, but not too bad. And it's nice and just room temperature here. I don't want to unroll too fast because I don't want, haha, beautiful. I don't want it to crack. So I'm going to try to adjust this so you can see it. All right, so I'm going to start with my caramel. I decided to go with a turtle flavor today. So I'm going to start with my caramel, and I'm just going to, kind of drizzle this over my cake. Never made a turtle one of these before, but I was trying to figure out what I had on hand and what would go well, and this is what I came up with. All right, so kind of reminds me of a poke cake, and this flavor. My mom used to make poke cakes a lot when I was a teenager. You just poke holes in the cake and pour the caramel in, and it all soaks in. It's really delightful. All right, so just emptying out my jar. I had about a half a jar left, so it's just to your taste, I think. All right, so, and I'm trying to get it out to the edges a little bit. I don't want to go too far to the edge. I think most of it's going to soak into the cake anyway. And then I'm going to take my toasted pecans and I'm going to sprinkle them over there. I think it's fun to have a little crunch in your cake. I think that gives it a nice texture and kind of a fun surprise in there. So not really a traditional Buche de Noel, but close enough for my taste. All right, that's enough. That's okay. A little left over for snacking. And then I've got my whipped cream. That'll be the bulk of the layer. So I've got my offset spatula and I'm just kind of lobbing it in there, and then I'll just gently spread it. I don't want to pull up too much of the pecans as I go, just trying to gently spread it to the edges as I go. Alrighty, almost there. And that whipped cream, you can see, is pretty stiff. It's holding its own there, so I'm hoping that's going to be great. All right. All right, almost. Just want to get those edges a little bit more. All right. Okay, so it's filled, and now the moment of truth has arrived, and we have to roll it back together. And as I said, a lady on TV said the other day, she was making a roulade, she said, you really only get one shot at this. So here we go. We just roll. I'm using my towel to kind of help me get started. And it's going to peel off as I go. So just gentle rolling. This isn't going too badly at all, honestly. Don't be afraid. Just keep proceeding with caution. Okay. And then I'm gonna try to roll it. Oops, let me pull my beautiful cake pan over here. I got my cake tray out. I'm just gonna try to roll it onto the plate as gently as I can. Oh my God, I think that might be the best I've ever done. So thank you for being here with me with that. So there we go. And yes, your dish towel is going to be stained with chocolate. I hope that's okay with you. I'm just gonna take that whipped cream off of the side that edged out. Now, the last thing we need to do before I'm going to set this in the fridge to chill, but I want to cut off my ends because those are going to be my, my knots on the log. So let me grab a sharp knife. Sharp knife, it's important. And I'm just going to trim off those edges so they're nice and, symmetrical and even. Trim off those edges, and I'm actually just going to let them sit there. And I'm going to put the whole thing in the fridge for about a half an hour to set up before I pull those off and frost it and put it together. Okay, it's time to frost our spring Yule log or our spring roulade. So let me grab it out of the fridge and I will show you how to put on the buttercream frosting. Okay, so I have my rolled cake here, and I've trimmed off the edges for my knots that are going to go on the outside of my cake. So I just want to grab a different knife. Sorry. Oh my goodness. Breaking stuff. All right, so I'm going to cut that off, and I'm just going to sort of lay it on top there. So it looks like a little knot on the edge of my cake. And then this one on the other end, I'm going to take that one and I'll probably put it here on the outside, like so. So I have 2 knots on my stump. All right, so set that cake aside, and now I have my serrated, I don't know what you call this, spatula, metal spatula, and I have my buttercream ganache, which I'm just going to spread over the top of my cake. Here we go. All right. So now my cake is totally frosted. I'm just sort of skimming off any extra, and then we're going to put our lines in the cake, our bark lines. Okay, so in order to put in my bark lines, there's a couple ways I can do this. So one way I can do it is, you know how bark has kind of, the overlapping layers on it? So I'm going to take the flat end of my spatula here, and I'm just going to drag through my log to create kind of a shingled bark look. And I'm even going to pull it off the edges, because bark sometimes breaks off in uneven chunks on the edges of a log. Okay, so there we go. Sort of scraping as I go. I want to create a nice, distinctive line here where my knot comes up. Okay, so I feel like that looks pretty good. And then the second thing you do to create, the impression of a log here is you just take an everyday fork, and you can drag lines. Particularly, I'm going to drag them around the knots, because knots in trees have those, and then my ends of my log. So I'm dragging them around in a circular pattern so that it looks like tree bark. It's actually exposing some of my whipped cream, which is not ideal, but I can kind of repair it. Okay, and then I can take and drag the fork across the top too if I want, but I don't think I want to in this case. I'll just do it along the edges of my knots, but not the rest of the log. All right, I'm going to stick that back in the fridge to firm up a little bit, and then I'm going to put on my beautiful decorations. Okay, it's time for the exciting conclusion to our spring Yule log. All I have left to do is decorate the cake with my flowers and leaves and a little bit of snowfall, because in northern Michigan in the springtime, if you go off into the woods, you can easily find snow and crocuses and little greenery popping up everywhere. So that's what we're going to do with our summertime turtle Yule log. Okay, so I'm just going to start with my little adorable daffodils or yellow roses. I don't know what they are, but they're pretty. And I'm just going to start tucking them hither and thither around the cake wherever the mood strikes me. Maybe they're mushrooms, I don't know. Normally I make this with marzipan mushrooms, or I'll make it with sometimes with meringue mushrooms. And then for Christmas, you'll put holly leaves on there. But for today, oh, that one doesn't want to go. I'm trying to poke it into the cake a little bit. So that one didn't have a stiff enough stem. Okay. I don't know where I want to put all these little flowers. All right, so I'm just going to add as I go, and I'm going to take my snow, my coconut snow that I created here, and I'm just going to sprinkle that around the edges of my plate here. Try to cover up a little bit of my mess on the edge of the plate. Tuck that in. And I'll sprinkle a little over the top, just here and there, until I think it looks right. A little down in the hollows, that's where the snow gathers, down in the valleys. Okay, and then I've got some leaves, and I'm just gonna have the leaves again sticking out or laying across near my flowers. Whatever I think looks good. I'll tuck one in there if I can, and then they can just fold over maybe a little bit, and so on and so forth, until I feel like I've got the look that I want. And you don't ever want to do too much, I think. Too much is never a good thing when it comes to decoration. Less is more. So, well, just a few more leaves and a couple more flowers, and I think it's going to look beautiful. Let's see if I can get that one in there. Okay, maybe one coming out the edge here. Yeah, right up there. Okay, and I think maybe I've got to put some flowers and some leaves on this side. This side looks a little lonely. And I can have them every which way, even coming out of the cake. That looks pretty good, I think. A little more snow on this side, just for garnish. I think it looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. I'll just give it a spin around and see if I like the way it looks. Maybe one more flower up here on the back side of my log, one or two, and a leaf. Voyole. That's funny. No, that's French. Okay, so it's not a Yule log, it's a spring log, but it is our turtle roulade. We have our chocolate sponge cake with caramel sauce, chopped toasted pecans, whipped cream, and chocolate buttercream ganache with spring flowers. Happy spring, everybody. I hope that your flowers come up beautiful and the days get warmer and you try out one of my awesome recipes. Thanks for sharing with us. Have a great day.